All right, my name is EJ Daigle, and for Module 1 Activity 2, I chose to take on Experiential Learning for CTE905. One of the first things I'll mention here is a quote I found from Aristotle, which was that, and this is like from 350 BC or something like this, for the things we learn, or for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. So to think experiential learning is something new is obviously not true. All right, so experiential learning, and I tried to give this my own definition by reading a lot of other folks' definitions along the way. Dewey talks about experiential learning, and Prosser talks about experiential learning, and lots of people are talking about experiential learning. But experiential learning, from my standpoint, goes beyond hands-on, has ties to experimentation, group learning, service learning, vocational education. And I gave a couple examples of all of these being experiences that allow for learning. Probably one of the simplest ones here is teaching a young boy or young child to tie their shoe. This is completely experience, and it's all about trial and error, and trial and error, and trial and error for that young kid. Go on a little bit further here. Experience learning could be a group of Boy Scouts going camping, learning how to make a fire, learning how to cook, learning how to set up a tent. It's out in the field. It's with other people. It's a group activity. And some of the other ones, that I think are a little more obvious. A hands-on learning experience is still experiential. Something as simple as a biology student dissecting a frog would be an experiential learning activity. Students volunteering for Habitat for Humanity. This could be an example of service learning, but it's definitely experiential learning. Perhaps as a group of construction students out working in the field and doing something for the better good, but it could be a group of students in a diversity course or in an ethics course or something, going out and learning about camaraderie and about building better communities and all these different things. And the last one here is one I take from Dunwoody, where we have a group of architecture students that they actually travel to Europe each year to explore historical architecture. And this isn't something it's different when you experience it in real life versus maybe looking at a picture in a book or looking at a picture on the internet. So experiential theorists, several folks that were mentioned in the readings, and at least one that I've added to the list here too. John Dewey, most of his work done in the early 1900s, but writes of the importance of experiential learning. Just kind of highlight this one here. Experiential components to the educational content. Argues that education should be both social and interactive. And at the same time, and I always thought this was kind of funny that both these guys doing very similar stuff, and we actually lost them in the same year. But Charles Prosser, a great Dunwoody employee back in the early 1900s, created the 16 theorems of vocational education. And although we didn't call it experiential learning, we didn't call it CTE, but what we did call it was vocational education, and it took on the theme of the learning environment resembling the work environment. So it's definitely about experience. Kurt Lewin, 1890 to 1947, researches experiential learning and cognitive development of children. So went into the details about what children were capable of picking up at each stage of life. And in some cases, experiential learning is the only way you're going to get through to a child. And in other cases, they've developed a greater cognitive ability to read and comprehend and things like that. Research also included group experiential learning. David Kolb and David created, using a lot of these other folks that we're talking about and others, created what's called Kolb's experiential learning cycle, which involved concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. The idea there being that it's more than just the experience. It's also about going back and trying to conceptualize what you learned and how you learned it. So a little bit more about experiential learning. Experiential learning's been around, I think, throughout all of human existence. You could go back to the earliest times in Egypt, where craftsmen took assistants under their wing to teach a skill. Although that process was perhaps less formal This would later become maybe what we're calling the modern day apprenticeship. They may not have called it an apprenticeship, maybe they didn't log hours, maybe there weren't tests, but really that's truly what it was. Let me close that out real quick, sorry about that. And then present. Today we see several examples of experiential learning, which goes from basic hands-on polytechnic schools and polytechnic laboratory approaches to learning to apprenticeships, internships, service learning, study abroad programs. And some of these programs are quite formal, while others may just be on the job, OJT type examples. And then the future. Schools obviously need to embrace all forms of education to best serve our students. But not just our students, we also have to best serve our industries too. So experiential learning is absolutely necessary in some industries. Simple example might be the medical industry, where nurses or doctors or nurse practitioners and such, they're required to do clinical internships to practice their skills in a real world, and they're required to have so many hours. And in this case, they're learning under an actual practitioner working with real patients. Or more complex or a little more abstract example might be the relationship between union apprenticeships, employment, and licensure. So that's my 5 minutes on experiential learning.